another edition or episode, I should say, of the P40 podcast. Today, I'm so honored to be sitting with the founder of the Assembly, Molly Goodson. I haven't seen you in person in, oh my God, over a year. And I thought of her instantly when I was coming up with the concept of Aquarius Rising Reimagined, because I thought if anyone knows what it's like to bring together community and a diverse community from all the different healing arts, Molly's a genius. And I love your newsletter. So I'm so excited to share all of your wisdom with our audience. And thank you so much for joining us, Molly.
Thanks for having me.
So what you been up to?
I am in San Francisco, which is where the Assembly is or was, I suppose. And that was the business that I opened about 3 years ago in San Francisco, and we closed, at the beginning of COVID when everything closed. And, actually we had to close and leave our space entirely in August. So since then, I've been doing a little bit of reflecting and sort of recovering from the experience of closing down that chapter and figuring out what's next, both personally and professionally. And thinking a lot also about sort of what I think the future of these sorts of communities can and will look like, and trying to do my best to predict the future, which is always a little bit of a challenge. But knowing that, that there's still a real desire and need out there for places and ways to sort of connect and to put these pieces of healing and wellness together, which was really a huge part of what we were doing at the Assembly. Was I always thought about it as sort of like allowing people to have all the different puzzle pieces and figure it out for themselves, because what each of us needs is different, but it's pretty powerful when we do it together.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you were saying you wish you could predict the future, because I feel that in a way is your superpower, because I feel like what you did at the Assembly, what you created as the Assembly, was foreshadowing for what we need now. Maybe it's changing form, but maybe rewinding, can you tell me how it was for you? Like, how did that concept come up? What was happening in your life when it was born in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I spent the first sort of big chunk of my career in online media. I've always thought that I would be a writer, and maybe I still will, or maybe I am. I don't know. But I spent the first chunk of my career in online media, and I have always loved creating and editorial and just the feeling of sort of having an editorial voice and having a curatorial voice, and sort of sharing, a mixture of things you find and love with people. And I, love reading magazines. And so when I came to a place in my life where I didn't want to be in the media world anymore, and I really wanted to focus in on sort of what I saw as the world of health and wellness was really changing, but I didn't think that the way that we talked to people about it was at all caught up with what people were looking for. Because, when it comes to trying to navigate what actually feels good, or what makes you feel good, or what makes you feel embodied or healthy or well, or whatever word you want to use, the way we're talked to on social media and regular media, it doesn't work. It doesn't make us feel good. It mostly makes us feel worse, in fact. But I saw that there were people that were just out there trying to figure this out for themselves. That's all of us. It's the way that we sort of piece together. I go to this yoga class on Mondays, and I go get a massage once a week over there. And I, go for runs on Saturdays and Wednesdays, or whatever it is. But everyone is sort of making their own, sort of putting their own puzzle together. But I also felt like not everybody had access to all the different pieces that I found really, really interesting. And when you think about sort of care in general, like the best models of care, when thinking about it from the medical world, is when all of your doctors are working together, right? It's like in an ideal world, as a woman, you're sort of like gynecologist would know, your regular doctor would know, the dermatologist you're seeing, in the medical world, like in great places where they have great, care, those doctors work together. In the same way, I feel like each of us has to do that for ourselves. And that is sort of designing a space and a place where you can do a bunch of different things. So for me, that was introducing people to sound baths and astrology and acupuncture and high intensity workouts and amazing speakers and music and art, and saying, I'm going to bring this all into one place, because I think that the truth of figuring out what makes you feel well is really creating that sort of web for yourself. And that was sort of what I was envisioned for the space that we had. And that's actually what we did. It was exactly what we thought it was going to be. We had all of those things and more. And it was amazing, and it really worked. It was different. It was different than anything else that I ever seen out there. And it still is different than anything that I've seen out there. So I have a lot of hope for the future of that sort of way of thinking about things. Because each of us, are tasked with figuring this out for ourselves.
Yeah, and can I just say, it was a dream come true. Like, I couldn't even believe it when I was experiencing it. First of all, for those who might not know, we'll share, like, when we post this, we'll share links to photos and things for people, because some people know just from all of my posts, like, I've been raving about it for years. But it was in this amazing old church in the Mission in San Francisco, which, by the way, what's happened to the church now? Is it?
It's empty.
We don't know. Oh. So my fantasy is that you go back.
Well, I would say that things with the landlord didn't end on the most positive note. So not sure that that's in the cards, but I have had those same visions. And moving out of that space was really, really heartbreaking, because it was a very special building, and it had a lot of heart. I think that any sort of religious gathering place, there's a real soul to the heart of it. And whatever, I don't practice Christianity, but still being in a sanctuary is being in a sanctuary. And it had a real energy to that too, and a history to it. I think it makes me sad that it's not going to be set up for a future of gathering in it, because that's really what that, it's a place for gathering.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it felt, and I feel the space loved having the assembly there. You could feel it. It was like a beautiful alchemy. It was a perfect alchemy. And you felt it the moment you walked in the door. I'll never forget the first time I walked in the door to have my first interview about possibly, doing some astrology with you guys, that I was just completely floored. Like, it was a, what we call in Jungian psychology, a numinous experience. Like, I'll never forget that feeling. I was like, this is magic. Like, this is when things come together that are like something bigger created this. And you were obviously the channel, and you had the vision, you were the visionary, but it also felt like this was really supported on such a deep level. And it's what was needed in that, at that time. It's still needed. That's the thing. But anyway, I just wanted to say that having that experience of going to a place where you could, it's like a dream, where you could see your friends, you could work, you could get a manicure, you could have a workout class, you could get a massage, you could get some Reiki, you could have your favorite coffee, your favorite tea, your favorite snacks, all your favorite health foods, things from Bayreuth that you love right there, You could sit in the garden under the lemon trees. I could feel like I was in Italy. I could just feel like I had all my favorite things, It was just incredible.
I mean, it was incredible. And it was, honestly, like, sometimes people ask me questions about it, and I'm like, listen, I was just making my own fantasy come true. I just was like, this is exactly what I want. And people would ask me, and I would just say, like, and I had to raise money and all to get investors and things like that. And, people would sort of be like, why do you think people want this? And I'm like, I want it. And I promise you, I'm not alone. And I wasn't, and it worked. And the business was, it was a complicated business, but it was a functional business, and it was a profitable business. And, but really it was just a dream. It was like a real dream come true. And I, going back to sort of what I was saying earlier, and that I always felt like it was really sort of like an editorial piece, like we were walking into like a magazine, and I was like, in every issue we had to do something different and bring in new voices and new contributors, but you always know what you're going to get is like a high quality experience, and we can bring in, we do the vetting for to get you the practitioners that we think are incredible, so just trust us. And I think it was an honor and a gift to have so many people put that trust in us. But we put a lot of very specific care into choosing everything that we did in there. And so I think we were able to earn that trust. And that was what, gave us the freedom just to sort of try a million different things. We would like always joke about how much stuff we were like trying and doing. It was like, we tried everything.
I know. I even remember making the macaroons at one of your events, like where we could decorate the macaroons. I was making like astrological macaroons. It was so cool. I still have photos of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Just as an example.
No, totally. It's just that there's not a lot of places out there where you can, get astrology and Reiki and manicures and like also wine and candy and workouts. And I mean, it's just, those are all the things that I love. So again, it was just really my own little brainchild. But it also, I think it also, most people, many of us, myself included, don't have a lot of spaces or places to go that really don't ask anything of you. It's like when you're going to work, you're doing work, or when you're going, you always have like a thing to do. And my hope was that this could be a place you could go when you don't necessarily need a thing to do. You could just be and feel like that no matter what it is that you came to, do, that it's valued the same. And if you're coming to work on some, business you're working on, great. If you're coming to read a book, we had people who came and literally just would sit and watch stream TV shows on their computers. And you'd be like, you're watching The Office. And like, I don't care, whatever. If this is where you want to watch The Office, come here and watch The Office. But, it was that sort of like all are welcome and we're not going to, judge anything that you decide that you want to do here.
And then you had some amazing entrepreneurs like launching these incredible, I would feel so inspired. I'd just be sitting there like, I'm going to write my horoscopes. And then next to me would be somebody like launching like some kind of like mega business. I would just like over here, the person at the table next to me, it was like these young kids like all these like major. I was like, what?
Yeah,
I was so inspired.
That was the best. I always in my head I sort of liken it to the like the fascia that sort of like holds our muscles together, because it's it's like the in between. It's like there we had so much stuff going on, but like there was so much magic in the in between moments when people would just chat or overhear the conversation next to them and actually like butt in or like say hi. And there were so many entrepreneurs who were building their businesses who got whether that was employees or investors or first checks just by just being there, and chatting with the person next to them or getting introduced to someone through someone else. And I think that sort of casual and like happenstance community is something that we don't have a lot of these days, and no one has had for the past year. And I think we really are missing. I was writing one of my newsletters recently that I sort of miss small talk, and people say horrible things about small talk, but like you miss that sort of just the casual running into somebody or chatting with somebody in line at something. And just because of this year, you've sort of lost that and everything. It's like every meeting has to have a point as opposed to just chatting with someone. And I really miss that.
Yes, no, that's a beautiful memory. I know exactly what you mean. I do miss that too. And I was thinking about that even just, because you were asking me about my dog, I would bring my dog Harpo, and like just that, like there's something about just having the place to go, because people would go to a cafe or they would go for a walk. You go for a walk, or you might run into somebody on the street, but knowing that you could go to a place, I guess it's like Cheers, right? But it's better because it's like go to a place where you're gonna see people, you're gonna always meet somebody new, you're gonna see people. I mean, I've made some amazing friends from the assembly that are still in my life, even though I'm all the way in India, just the most interesting people, unique people. And a lot of people don't realize that in San Francisco, I think a lot of people think of San Francisco as a very, like New York City, like a very social, if they don't live there, they don't realize that it's actually really isolated. The experience of it is very isolated, the way it's set up. I don't know, there's something about it, at least to me, compared to New York City. It doesn't have that small talk on the street, run into people.
Yeah, and I love San Francisco, it's home, but there's not sort of that like epicenter, those little like epicenters of action in the same way, where you're sort of like in a neighborhood or like, you know, around the East Village and you see the same people. Like it doesn't have that sort of energy. So it's isolating. And also, you know, it's also pretty competitive. And that was something that was also, you know, really vital to me, was to create a place where I'm, you know, was encouraging other people to like build within, you know, it's like getting the practitioners, and it was, you know, hopefully you felt this way, but it was always for me, like, I want you to be able to build your business from within this business too. And I don't want to get in the way of anybody. And it took a long time, you know, I think in my career to fully come around to the fact that like that competition only exists in your head for the most part, and that you can, you know, create a place where everybody can, you know, like win together. But it's a different mentality than sort of like what we're trained to do, and especially in the, you know, in the startup world where you're trained to just sort of look at everything as competition and feel like there's only going to be one winner. And you know, maybe that made it harder for me to do things like raise large amounts of money or whatever. But it made me a lot happier to feel like some of the folks who, you know, were able to sort of share their gifts within the space were able to then, like, you know, translate some of those people into customers and clients and doing things on their own. Like that was really valuable to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what you said about how you put so much care into the choosing, like the curating of the practitioners and the services and everything. I mean, every detail. That's your Virgo, right?
Yeah.
Molly's a Virgo, I think, if I remember. Yes. I love that about Virgo. Like every detail was thought out. And that's what makes the difference. And also that you didn't sell out and just try to like do something quick fakes, corporate, like nothing like that. It was really like, it was like a magazine. It was like a beautiful magazine. Like, it's true. It was like a beautiful, every day was like that there. That's, you wouldn't go in and just be like, oh, now it's, a lot of times people start off like that and then they just kind of like let it go too. That's the other thing. And I was so impressed that it stayed at that level. Like you didn't just be like, okay, we got it off. It was cool. And now like whatever, just like bring in anyone, just keep it going, you know, save money.
Yeah. I think that it probably sometimes like got on my team's nerves how much I was sort of like hands in all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was also the fun of it too. I mean, I really enjoy the exploration of this whole world and of learning. Like, you know, I didn't, you know, going into the assembly, I didn't know it. I had not done these things either. Like I wasn't coming in as an expert. I was coming in as an explorer, like along with everyone else. And that, you know, that sort of curiosity is a lot of what drove me and drove the team and drove us to always be trying to find new things. And I think that like curiosity as a spirit is contagious in the best way possible. And that was like always our hope. It was sort of like if someone's like, well, I was thinking about trying to go to astrology night, but like I've never done anything like that before. And you could just encourage them. You're like, yeah, go, like definitely do it. Like that's so fun. You should totally go. And so I think just like bringing that sort of like infectious curiosity into the space is really important.
Yes, and even the way you had it designed, like all these different artists came in for, again, for those people who don't know, like it was beautiful, like every detail of the design was there too. Like, and it was so beautiful, and yet, and also like, just, I don't know, like so fun and inspiring. I don't know. There was just something like, just like those details, like the things you had written on the walls, you know, and
yeah,
the people will remember, like wear your hair. What was it like?
Yeah, put your hair up, let your hair down.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, that, I mean, I will say that the landlord like did not understand most of the decisions that we made with the design. You know, he had sort of bought the church. He'd spent some, you know, some of his money and some time, you know, fixing it up, but fixing it up in a way that felt to us like he was trying to make it like corporate or officey. And so we, you know, removed some of the things that he had done not that long ago. And he was sort of like, why are you taking the time to do all these little things? And you know, we worked with an incredible design team, husband wife duo, Sarah and Rich Combs of Joshua Tree, and they, watching their process, just I learned so much about how important those details are because people noticed them, and people would say, just, you know, you'd walk in, they'd be like, oh, you changed every light, you know, like light fixture to brass, and you're like, yeah, just those little things that show that this like that it's care, and it's not expensive stuff. You know, some of the stuff that people, and those little, you know, affirmations that we painted places, that wasn't those weren't the pieces that cost us a lot of money, but they just showed, that it was a place that we put a lot of like actual care and love into. And I think that when people saw those things and noticed those things, it made them appreciate the space. And I think as a business owner, it made people treat it with a lot of respect. People were incredibly respectful of the space. And I think it's because they saw that we wanted to present them with a space that made them feel respected too, So I think that when you present something like that, you get it back.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And just to follow up with the reason I brought up about San Francisco feeling a little bit isolated, like me coming from New York, honestly, the assembly was one of the things that kept me in San Francisco, because it was the thing I needed, where I could have a place where I could meet. And the thing is that I found, I was like, there's got to be amazing people in San Francisco, because before I went to the assembly, like I spent a year going, I know the city has amazing people, but I can't figure out how to meet anybody. I just couldn't figure it out. Like, I was like, where's everybody in their house? I'm like, look at all these amazing where are the people? They're in their car, they're inside, where are they? And then I found them in the assembly.
Yeah, I mean, it also, again, like sort of made the assembly in a vision of what I was really excited about. But I think I underestimated how much of an impact that would have on me. I also was pretty, a little disillusioned with San Francisco before opening the space. And it really showed me, the heart of the city that still exists, and introduced me to so many people from different, different careers, different walks of life, different ways of sort of tackling and ways of making it work in a city that honestly can make it really hard to feel like you want to make it work in it. But the amount of people who were there and wanted to dig in and build community there, it really changed my perspective on San Francisco. And that was also one of the main reasons why we chose the Mission as the neighborhood where we wanted to do it, because it was really important to me to not put it down someplace where it would sort of get wrapped up in so much of what people think of San Francisco these days, of like Silicon Valley kind of vibe. And that's fine. I know a lot of people in that world, and I've been in that world, and that's great too. But it was more important to me to find a place that was sort of separate from that, and also that you could come and walk into it and not feel like you had to have a certain kind of job to like be welcomed in. And I think that by the nature of that, and by the nature of where it was, it did bring people sort of out of their apartments and out of the woodwork in ways.
It did.
Yeah.
Pardon me one sec. This is my pet crow who's relentless, and he's not going to leave us alone. Okay. There you go. Doing a podcast. This is real time India.
Is that an actual, not an actual pet, but like just a crow you've gotten to know?
Yeah, it's a crow that comes every day. I just call him my pet because he comes every single day.
Do you feed him, or do you just say hi to him?
I do.
Okay.
I feed him crackers and doses and things. Yeah, that's why. I don't think he would come just to say hi. That would be sweet.
Well,
he has an agenda.
He's got
He's
an agenda.
hungry.
He's hungry. I'm glad he got what he needed.
He's so cute. Although he does actually, if I have time, he'll sit and actually eat it with me. It's so cute. Like, I mean, he'll just hang out. Like, he doesn't, the other crows will just take it and fly away. He just actually hangs out. Anyway, many people that follow me, he always shows up for everything I do. So he ends up being part of all the things.
I'm honored that he came by.
Yeah. He's my new assembly, since I have no people. Speaking of small talk, it's now with the crow.
No, the crow.
This is life in 2020.
Hey, take it where you can get it.
I know. Life in 2020. Going into 2021. So that's a good segue into. So yeah, what do you feel like, what's coming to you now in terms of bringing community together? Do you see it coming back into, I mean, are you hopeful of having a space again, or do you want to focus more online, or kind of both?
Yeah. At the beginning of the pandemic, we shifted to do a lot of our programming online. And, I come from a digital background, and, doing that was not, there was like something natural about it. But at the same time, the assembly was so rooted in that in the gathering in person, it was hard to really fully, as an entrepreneur, sort of reconcile the like assembly as I wanted it to be and like what we were doing. And at the same time, you know, not to get too deep in the weeds, but like, you know, we had a pretty large team and a lot of expenses. So just like, you know, it sort of wasn't really working. I'm really interested. I mean, I'm interested to sort of see what the next phase of this all looks like. I do think that it might be a little while before people want to do, you know, you spend time at the assembly, like it was pretty crowded most of the time. Like it was very, you know, packed and sort of, I like to say, we sort of pedaled in crowds, and it was like the best when it had, you know, hundreds of people like packed in there. And so I think we're a little bit away from people feeling really comfortable with that. But I know that there's like a huge pent up desire to gather and to do things together again, even in small groups, and, you know, however safely. But you know, I also think, you know, especially for women who have sort of been I think sort of disproportionately sort of like had their like leisure time and like self time taken away by this, whether that's because of, you know, families and kids. And you know, I think for women, what I observed a lot is that, you know, women especially sort of feel like they need to have like a thing that they're going to do that serves a purpose to give themselves permission to like take breaks. And I think that with the pandemic, those reasons have sort of been taken away. And so when I talk to, you know, assembly community members and friends, I'm saying like, what are you doing that is something that you're doing just for yourself? And the answer is so often nothing. And people have sort of lost that entirely. And so I think that there is a huge pent up need for that. And so I've been trying to think about how to bring that back into people's lives, and what are ways to do that safely. And, you know, I think for a lot of folks who spend their entire days on Zooms like this, I understand that there's like a reluctance to spend any extra time, you know, on the screens. And so I'm just sort of thinking about what the future is going to look like, but I don't necessarily think that's where like the big gathering is going to come back immediately. And so, you know, I've been sort of noodling with some ideas and talking to folks, and also it's been important to me to continue to sort of listen and learn. And if there are ways that I can support other people's businesses with, you know, the platform that we still have, the community that we have, like that's been big on my mind too. You know, a lot of the folks who were practitioners, and, you know, whether or not means like other studios that are having a hard time staying open, or other healing spaces, or folks who work in the hospitality industry. I mean, we work with a lot of restaurants and a lot of, you know, different sort of like food and beverage providers at the assembly, and those people have had really extremely tough years. So just continuing to try to think about how to help other folks. And that's been on my mind. And then also it was important for me to like help all of my team sort of land in their next places. So that's that was sort of a project as well. So I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a real pent up desire, and that'll come back. And I think that some things will probably be different for a longer period of time than that.
Yes. I was going to ask you, so that you are still keeping the community, like you still have the connection with the original, because that was a big community you built, even online. I don't even know if everyone actually went to the assembly, like your Instagram community and things like that.
Yeah, so we got Instagram, which I will certainly say that I've developed sort of a conflicted feeling about over the course of this year. You know, my newsletter that I still send out, and then we have, you know, a Slack community for the folks who are members as well. So, I mean, there's definitely pieces of it. I definitely feel like I'm, you know, stoking the embers of the fire still. And it's amazing. I mean, I still get really kind notes from people just sort of hoping for space. I had a member last week who just sent me a message to say, like, I had a dream that we were all back at the assembly, except for this time it was on a lake, and I was like, all right, maybe like maybe the future is on a lake. I
Maybe
don't
the
know.
next is like the nature
I know.
setting, the nature
That was
retreat. I
always
can see that.
that was always my like side dream, was to do something more like more like a retreat, a little away from the city. And I do think about that still, because I think that like flexibility in where people work will, I think, stick around for a while. And so if there is a flexibility and people can, you know, do what they need to do from different places, like maybe there's more of an opportunity outside the city. And nature is really important to me. Being outside is really important to me. So I think about that. So yeah, it's like I like to keep my mind busy in that way, but also I have tried to rest and recover and stuff like that too.
Yeah, because I mean, you probably typical Virgo workaholic, working nonstop. You were like the mother of all those people too. You're the mother of the assembly, mother of this big team, and that was a lot to take on. I can't even imagine what your days were like when you were running it at full speed.
Yeah, it was yeah, it was a lot of people to take care of, and and I, you know, in the winding down, I tried my best to give everyone who felt like they needed space, to give them space and listen and hear and talk. And it was like, I was pretty, by like September, I was like, I need to take a breather. I was like, I gotta take it down a notch and just rest for a minute.
Yeah. No, I was thinking that has been kind of the blessing in disguise of 2020 for people who were just full on, you know, never getting a break, you know, and thank you for all of the energy that you did put into it, but you definitely deserve a rest. Even though I know you would
Yeah.
probably love working and love being busy, you also need that. But that's why the nature would be the nature retreat would be the perfect balance, because you would not have the stress of city life and you could
Yeah.
be in nature and do what you love and keep the community going. I do
Maybe.
think that is the future. I do think retreat centers, like things like that, like a different way of doing that is going to be, because people, even, I mean, we did see through this pandemic that's everyone. I mean, I don't know how it feels now. Was there a mass exodus in San Francisco, or was people exaggerating, or has there been a lot of people?
I mean,
from your perspective,
there's like, I think the rumors are a little exaggerated, but definitely people have, like, I think people have left. I think they will come back, but I mean, I think that there's like this interest in, because we haven't also been able to sort of travel in the like more like extravagant or luxurious ways to different countries. I like that it's, people have a new energy around the like nearby environs, and you know, the national parks are like overwhelmed. So, you know, there's like that, there's a lot to love. There's a lot to love outside. And I, you know, hope people continue to treat it all with respect. But yeah, I think that just getting people outdoors is huge.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important, especially depending, like you said. I don't know how it's going to evolve into people being comfortable, but I think you're absolutely right that there's going to be the desire for more connection. And I guess the next question would be based on that, because I definitely agree with you that, you know, there's screen burnout, there's definitely Zoom burnout now, and yet we still need that connection. So how do we find the balance going into 2021? Like, what are some of the optimal ways that we could create community online that doesn't feel like depressing and draining and just another Zoom call?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's still, I mean, I had a Zoom game night with some friends last night. I think that it's still really positive that we were able to do things like this and see each other's faces across the world, and and do that. And I think, like, you know, I think that and people really need connection. And I think that there are a lot of folks who have been pretty isolated throughout this, and that's you know, I think that's worrisome, because if we need other humans to survive. And so I think, you know, I think a lot about how to sort of connect with intention around it, and you know, be really specific in the ways that I, you know, try to show up for people. And that's like, I do a lot of just sort of like, random texts when you're thinking about somebody, you're asking someone a specific question rather than just always being like, how are you? You're like, no one knows how to answer that question. So I do think that, keeping things intentional and is incredibly valuable. And I think that starting sort of the beginning of the year, hopefully we'll be back in a place where we can do, see people safely in small groups and things like that. I think that there's also, I think that there are some like really amazing digital communities that are hyper specific. And I think that there's like a little bit of a future coming where people are in sort of like smaller, more specific communities, whether that's around like, a specific passion point or something that you're studying. I think it's incredible to see how many people are picking up new skills and learning things because they've got like sort of this different sort of chunks of time. And I think that sort of getting to know communities around learning and around trying new things is still there. So I think that's pretty inspiring too. The amount of, I was talking to, in the assembly community about something, and the amount of people who are taking a class of some kind, or just like, learning something, and it's not something that they would thought that they would be doing. I just think that that's interesting. And I think, those are places and ways where you can sort of meet a new sort of like group that has an intention together. So I think that I'm looking forward to sort of learning more about that in the next year too.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's definitely like in the study point. It's funny, even in astrology, like there's been luckily this perfect timing of confluence where, at least in Western astrology, where the North Node's been in Gemini, which is all about learning, and even going into Aquarius, with the two major planets, Saturn and Jupiter, joining up in Aquarius, as I was telling you before we started recording. Aquarius is an air sign, but it's also very connected to technology. So it's also connected to groups, which is interesting. And by the way, the lockdown, the first one happened in March when Saturn first went into Aquarius, and that was when we first felt that the group's taken away from us. Mm-hmm. So it's coming back, but it's interesting that as it's about to come back, we're all kind of in that shelter in place thing again. But Jupiter's about to enter, which is a more expansive planet and a more hopeful planet. And so maybe it's like we start to have some freedom, but then we are still having this lesson we had around, like you said, maybe the gifts of not having to travel as much for work, or, being able to have more flexibility with where we work from, and I guess the hidden gifts and all of this. But yeah, also the need to be back in community and hopefully in person, like the physical. There's a lot of, we're moving from earth to air as like they're calling it the Great Mutation because we've been earth signs. So that's a little bit of a concern because, we're going to crave it, earth more than ever, but air is technology. It's more like, everything digitalized and digitized, or whatever it's called. That, we're definitely going to be feeling that shift. I think that's still going to happen. That trend's still happening, obviously. But maybe because of that, we'll need, in order to balance, so we don't feel out of balance with the elements, we're still going to need earth. We can't just go all into technology and not feel that on our bodies, for sure. We already know that, how that goes. So I think, we'll probably will need earth and physical connection more than ever, however we can do it, I guess, depending on how this all plays out, right?
Who knows?
Fascinating. I know. So I guess last thing, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if you have any, like, I don't know, because you write such beautiful reflections in your newsletter, and maybe just like what something recent was like, because I love how you just things that you ponder and extract from this whole experience, like kind of where are you at right now going into 2021? What's the thing you're taking away, like personally, maybe like as a not want to say lesson, but like a teaching or kind of a realization maybe you had over this last year?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. A lot, I would say, that I have certainly learned a lot over this past year. I think that something that's been on my mind, there's a couple of things that have sort of been on my mind throughout this. I think that a big piece of it for me was actually, before the pandemic, I was talking to my therapist who told me that whenever I sort of got in these mindsets around sort of like an invented, we a lot of us sort of can get into these competitions that are just live in our own head and that no one else even knows that they're playing, and we're just ultimately playing them with ourselves. Is that reminding myself that, for someone like me who like lives in that a lot and can get wrapped up in it, just the reminder that she told me I should just always tell myself I can't win. And it doesn't mean that anything negative. It's just that there is no winning. There's not a winning. There's no winning. When you get to whatever made up finish line you think you're getting to, you're just going to give yourself another one anyway. And so I think that sort of breathing through that, like, I can't win. That's not how this is going to be. I shouldn't shape anything around winning and losing, has been helpful. And also understanding that, that some of the toughest emotions are part of it, right? Like, we're going to feel grief, and we're going to feel regret, and we're going to feel sadness, and they're part of all of it. And, I think there's a reason why people tell you to feel your feelings, because that's the only thing that you really can do in those times. So that's been certainly on my mind. And then I think that probably the thing that I think about the most, maybe in sort of like a larger sense, is just how so much of the what people are looking for and the pain that people have is just around not feeling like anyone is listening to them. And I think that finding the ways to actually hear other people and not immediately go into solving mode, because most people actually aren't asking for solutions or advice. They're just asking to be heard. And I think, we see that pain play out on really large scale in this country, especially. We saw a lot of that play out around the election. And I think that we've lost that ability. And my hope, maybe somehow in some small way, that coming out of this pandemic, because we've all had a lot more time in our own heads, that we can, just do a slightly gentler, kinder way of actually listening to other people. Because so much of the world's pain, I think, comes from feeling like people feeling like they're not being heard. And so, those are the things that are probably biggest on my mind this year, but I'm sure as soon as we get off this, I'll remember something else that I probably should have said, but always got some things in my head.
I know. We'll have to read. We'll direct people to sign up for your newsletter.
Sign up for the newsletter. You'll get whatever's on my mind.
Because I love it. I've shared pieces of it even with my community, because I just love your reflections. They're so honest and like unique and fresh. Like, not, it's like really down to earth, but still very deep, which I love. It really makes you think. And that's what I was going to add. So last thing, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot with these big questions, but 2021, like, when you just feel into it, like, what's coming to you? Just, not to predict the future, but just kind of what we're stepping into.
I think my hope is that we continue to sort of step into the challenge of it, but also step into the freedom of it, and allowing things to not look at all like we thought that they were going to. And I think we've all been forced to sort of work through that. So it doesn't always, even if it starts in fear, it doesn't end in fear, because we keep going. And so, I think my hope for 2021 is that it becomes a feeling of freedom, and that when things don't look the way you thought they were going to, that can also be a burden released, not just a burden on. And so, all good things in 2021. And it's not going to, some magic switch is not going to get flipped at midnight on the 31st. It's all a process, and it feels like chaos sometimes, but we're doing it together.
We're in it together. That's a beautiful note to end on, because I think that's, if nothing else, that's what I'm taking into 2021, is we're in it together. We have to support each other through this messy, chaotic transition. It's a complete paradigm shift. There's so many deeper tectonic plates moving that we don't even know like why all of this is crumbling on a much grander scale. But I think it has to, in order to give us the kind of freedom that we ultimately want to have, hopefully. But it's always messy on the way there. But yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for all the time that I had at the assembly, you know, and getting to know you in person. And now it's nice to actually talk to you in this.
It's good to talk to you too.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for all the kind words and everything. And this sounds like you're doing some amazing work over there. And we miss you in San Francisco, but you're doing good things.